Last spring, a Marine Research Institute pulled every member of a robotics survey team off a routine mapping contract, sealed more than 40 hours of footage under a non-disclosure order, and told the public the expedition had simply run out of funding. It hadn't. Two of the engineers who worked on that mission have since described, off the record, what the robot found before the order came down. The mission started as something almost boring. A survey ship was contracted to map an unrecorded stretch of wall along a deep ocean trench in the Pacific, the kind of routine geological survey that happens dozens of times a year and almost never makes the news. A remotely operated vehicle, essentially an underwater robot the size of a small car, was lowered over the side to run sonar passes along the trench face and photograph the rock layers for a geology database. Nobody expected to find anything except stone. There was one detail buried in the mission briefing that nobody on the crew thought twice about that morning. This exact stretch of trench wall had been flagged as unsurveyed in 4 separate mapping expeditions going back more than a decade, and every single report cited the same explanation: equipment malfunction. On paper, that's an unremarkable line in a logistics document. 4 unconnected sensor failures at 4 different points in time at the exact same coordinates isn't the kind of thing anyone questions on the first day of a routine contract. You just note it, sign off, and lower the robot. The robot's descent alone tells you how far removed this place is from anything resembling a normal dive site. At 300 meters, the last blue light from the surface disappears completely. At 600 meters, the water temperature drops to just above freezing and stays there. Past 1,000 meters, the pressure outside the robot's hull is already strong enough to crush a human body instantly. The pilots weren't worried about depth. Depth was the job. What nobody planned for was what the sonar picked up at just under 2,000 meters down. Buried into the trench wall, invisible from every previous survey pass because of the angle it sat at, was an opening. Not a crack, not a fissure, an actual cave mouth, wide enough to fly the robot straight through it. According to the mapping data collected that day, nothing this large had ever been recorded at this location before. Before we get into what the robot found once it went inside, hit like and subscribe, because this is the part where the mission stopped being routine. The robot pushed roughly 80 meters into the opening before the pilots on the surface noticed something strange on their sonar readout. The chamber ahead of the robot wasn't closing in the way cave systems normally do the deeper you go. It was opening up, into a space large enough that the robot's sonar couldn't get a clean return off the far wall. Whatever this cave actually was, it was bigger on the inside than anything the survey team had budgeted time or battery power to fully explore. Here's a detail worth holding on to. For months before this dive, the survey ship's fish finder had occasionally picked up a large, slow-moving return near this exact stretch of trench wall, always dismissed by the crew as a thermal layer, a pocket of warmer water bending the sonar signal. Keep that in mind. As the robot moved deeper into the chamber, its cameras picked up long parallel gouges scraped into the rock along both walls, spaced too evenly to be erosion, too deep to have been made by current or drifting debris. Nearby, wedged into a crevice, the robot's manipulator arm recovered a fragment of what marine biologists later confirmed was a calcified vertebra, the kind of dense, ring-shaped bone segment you find in the spinal column of large cartilaginous fish. Sharks, in other words. This particular fragment was large enough that, based on known proportions, the animal it came from would have measured well beyond anything currently swimming in any ocean on Earth. Now, before this goes any further, let's deal with the obvious objection honestly, because ignoring it would be dishonest. The scientific consensus is that the megalodon, the largest predatory shark ever documented, went extinct somewhere around 3.5 million years ago, most likely driven out by cooling ocean temperatures and the collapse of the large marine mammal populations it depended on for food. That consensus is built on real fossil evidence, and none of that is in dispute here. But here's the detail that consensus doesn't account for. Nearly every megalodon fossil ever recovered, every single tooth sitting in a museum case around the world, was pulled from shallow coastal sediment, riverbeds, or the kind of continental shelf areas that fishing trawlers and dredging operations regularly disturb. The floor of a deep ocean trench, and especially the inside of an enclosed cave system 2,000 meters down, has essentially never been directly sampled by anyone, for the simple reason that almost nothing has ever gone down there to look. An extinction date based entirely on where we happen to search isn't the same thing as an extinction date based on everywhere the animal could have survived. The data and the name are two different things, and it's worth keeping them separate. There's another number worth sitting with here. Out of every stretch of seafloor on Earth deep enough to qualify as trench or hadal zone, only a sliver, measured in a low single-digit percentage, has ever actually been surveyed with a camera, let alone sampled for anything as specific as a fossil. An extinction date is only ever as strong as the search that produced it, and in an environment like this one, that search has barely begun. Let's pause here for a second, because this is the point where the mission stopped being about geology entirely. So far, the robot had found an uncharted cave, evenly spaced gouges cut into solid rock, and a bone fragment from something the size of nothing that should still be alive. If you're finding this as unsettling as the engineers who worked this mission apparently did, go ahead and subscribe, because what happened during the robot's final pass through the chamber is the reason this footage was sealed in the first place. By this point, the control room on the surface had gone almost completely silent. Nobody was calling out anything over the radio except depth and battery percentage, and every person on that ship was watching the same feed, waiting to see if anything else moved. On its last scheduled pass before the robot's batteries ran low, the pilots picked up a return on sonar that hadn't been there minutes earlier. A mass moving slowly along the chamber floor, roughly the length of 2 city buses parked end to end. The robot's forward camera caught only a fraction of it before the pilots, following standard protocol for an unidentified object of that size, pulled the vehicle back toward the cave entrance. In the recovered footage, what's visible isn't a clear shot of anything. It's a shape, dense and dark, moving with the slow, deliberate motion of something that wasn't startled, sliding along the edge of the light before the frame goes dark entirely as the robot reverses out of the chamber. Remember that sonar return the fishing crew kept writing off as a thermal layer for months before this dive. Once researchers compared the shape and movement pattern of that earlier signal against the sonar recorded inside the cave, the two match closely enough that it's difficult to call it a coincidence. Whatever the robot filmed in that chamber, it hadn't just arrived. It had likely been using this exact stretch of trench wall as a resting place for a long time, quietly passing beneath a survey ship's hull for months before anyone pointed a camera at it directly. Here's where the story stops being about biology and starts being about what happened after the robot came back up. Within 48 hours of the ship returning to port, the 2 lead engineers on the ROV team were formally reassigned to unrelated projects. The full sonar and video archive from the dive was classified under an internal review process typically reserved for equipment failures involving expensive government contracts, not marine biology surveys. The Institute's public statement cited, quote, budget restructuring, as the reason the mapping contract ended early. Think about what that actually requires. You don't seal 40 hours of routine geological survey footage over a whale carcass or a strange rock formation. You don't reassign your 2 most experienced ROV pilots in the middle of an active contract because of a sonar glitch. Classifying footage and quietly moving personnel is what happens when an institution has decided the honest answer is more disruptive than a vague one. The cover-up isn't a rumor built on nothing. It's the most logical explanation for a set of decisions that don't make sense any other way. Remember those 4 previous survey teams? The ones whose equipment supposedly failed at these exact coordinates over the past 10 years. None of their footage was ever fully released either. Each report was filed, reviewed, and closed within days, always using the same vague technical language, and never once followed by a return expedition to those coordinates until this one. Whatever the Institute is protecting people from at this cave, it appears to have been protecting them from it for a lot longer than 48 hours. As of this recording, that stretch of trench wall has been quietly reclassified on public mapping databases as a restricted survey zone. With no further expeditions scheduled, no agency has confirmed what that reclassification is actually protecting people from, or what it's protecting from people. The cave hasn't been sealed. It's simply been marked off limits, which might be an even stranger kind of admission than an explanation would have been. Somewhere along that trench wall, in a chamber no camera has fully mapped, something large enough to leave gouges in solid rock is still moving through the dark. on its own schedule, deciding when or if it ever surfaces again. If this one made you think twice about what's still down there, hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.